As soon as you hear about North Korea, your flesh starts to tingle, and you are right. This country is far from being a warm country, it must be said. Already their way of life does not resemble at all the way of life of the other countries of the world. But then, if you saw their army, their soldiers, and the draconian conditions in which their military training takes place, you would be stunned. If in other videos we have told you about North Korea, its strange customs and the things that are forbidden there, and you have laughed because you find their regime lacking in laxity, today we change the register. In this video, you will learn everything about the North Korean army, its training, and the way they are made into soldiers. And this time, we are talking about the real military, not the people. Let's get started. As you know, North Korea is one of the countries that have the most political conflicts with others, with South Korea at the top of the list, which, let's say, doesn't like it very much. And to make sure that nothing will touch it, North Korea has a heavy artillery, very heavy, to be taken in both directions. To start with, you need to have an idea about the organization of this army. The Korean People's Army is the military force of North Korea and the armed wing of the Workers' Party of Korea. As you know, it is the General Secretary of the WPK, Kim Jong-un, who is the commander and supreme guide of the Central Military Commission of the WPK. Yes, you understood. He is the one who presses the little button when he has to send a nuclear missile. The army is composed of 5 branches: the land force, the naval force, the air and anti-aircraft force, the strategic forces, and the special operation force. In 2021, the Korean Army was designated the second largest military organization in the world, with 29.9% of the North Korean population actively serving, either in reserve or in paramilitary capacity. Today, it is the 4th largest military in the world in terms of personnel, with 1,125,000 active and 950,000 reserve personnel, and the largest in terms of number of military personnel per 1,000 population. If you see Kim Jong-un wearing this smile of satisfaction, it is because he knows why. He has an ultra-powerful army with formidable soldiers, well-trained to show no mercy to their opponents. Just look at the draconian and almost unbearable conditions in which they train. But before we get to that, let's back up and stop at the point where these soldiers are still young, innocent teenagers who wouldn't hurt a fly and who aspire to a peaceful life with their families or a promising professional future. In North Korea, you can't say no, because you simply can't. Every citizen who is called to serve in the army must obey orders. And its conscription system does not really make you want to become a soldier. First of all, the military service in North Korea is the longest in the world, and apart from the members of the socioeconomic class and political prisoners, men and women between 17 and 30 years of age have to fulfill their civic duty and serve the army for 10 and 6 years respectively. It is important to know that the army represents 5% of the population, which is not insignificant when you consider that there are about 25.97 million of them. In this military service, the soldiers of the Korean People's Army must also serve 3 years in the People's Army, which also manages its own factories, agricultural farms, and arms businesses. There is an article in the North Korean Constitution that states national defense is the supreme duty and honor of citizens. Citizens defend the country and serve in the armed forces as required by law. So they are warned from a very young age. And speaking of warning, they had better be prepared because what awaits them is far from easy. Indeed, conscripts enter the army with the idea that they will be subjected to rigorous training from the moment they are drafted, with the aim of making them loyal, brave, and hardened little soldiers. And believe me, hardened is an understatement. And nothing better to achieve this than to accustom the apprentice soldiers to very harsh living conditions from the start. To begin with, it is out of the question to pamper them. They are forced to live in places where the minimum of comfort does not exist. You should know that the military installations in North Korea are very rudimentary and archaic, which makes it very difficult to live there. Well, don't worry, they don't sleep on the floor. They still have dormitories, but I let you imagine the state of these. They are overcrowded, which means that the soldiers have to squeeze each other like sardines in a can, a wink to Patrick Sebastian, and sleep on top of each other. Added to that, the apprentice soldiers often have to face shortages of food and drinking water. It's not that there is a lack of food and water in North Korea, but it's mostly to force the future soldiers to develop extraordinary physical and mental resilience to survive in any distressing situation. At times, these soldiers are forced to take on non-military tasks, and many spend a third or even a half of their tour of duty, such as plowing fields or working on construction sites. Due to food shortages and economic hardship, soldiers must find ways to feed themselves and supplement the basic rations provided to them. Rations that are truly paltry for men who need energy more than anyone else. It is not finished. The North Korean soldiers know great difficulties both during the service and after. They are entitled to only 15 days of leave once a year, and they are entitled to between 10 and 15 days of leave if the reason is valid and validated, such as for award ceremonies, weddings, or the burial of parents. Oh well, no vacation by the sea under the coconut trees. No time off to finally go to sleep. Now let's get down to business. The physical and mental training of the soldiers. Yes, mental, because it must be of steel to support such conditions. The military training in North Korea is nothing like the military training of other armies. It is based on intense physical exercises and mental indoctrination methods. After spending soft nights in the dormitories, the soldiers wake up to extremely difficult exercises. From the moment they get up, they are mercilessly subjected to forced marches, close combat simulations, survival maneuvers, and war simulations. The objective is to push the soldiers to exceed their limits, to surpass themselves, to never think of giving up, because simply in wartime, failure is not an option, so we must make them as resistant as possible. In fact, the soldiers have to perform intense training that no other human being would be able to do, such as undergoing extreme temperatures while doing the exercises, exploding chains wrapped around them without using tools, pulling extremely heavy loads, breaking ice blocks with their bare hands, to face monster fires, to dive in icy water, to jump to incredible heights without support, to run on water, to receive blows of sticks on the body and to make them break in two, to be always perfectly synchronized during the military parades because the Tenchin Ki-Kim is never far and he watches over them. They must also be aces in martial arts of all kinds, of course. In short, you understood it. They must be the best and especially not disappoint their supreme chief who is not very nice when he feels offended. Nevertheless, the latter is very proud of his troops and composed of nearly 1.3 million active duty personnel, which is more than twice the 599,000 soldiers of the Republic of Korea's armed forces. Let's take the example of the training of this Commando Unit 124 of the North Korean Army. This elite corps of the North Korean Army was trained for 2 years in the 1960s in a breathtaking way, when the relations between North and South Korea were tense from the geopolitical point of view. At the time, this Special Forces Commando of the Korean People's Army was created in the greatest secrecy in response to the creation of the Korean Central Intelligence Agency by the South Koreans, an intelligence service intended to spy internationally and in particular in North Korea in order to track down any form of opposition to the regime. Its 31 hand-picked members were trained in infiltration and exfiltration techniques, weapons, navigation, airborne operations, hand-to-hand combat with an emphasis on the use of the sword and concealment. They had to be able to run over rough terrain at high speeds carrying 30-kilogram bags on their shoulders or be hit with an axe on the palm of the hands or on the abdomen, even if it meant sometimes losing fingers or suffering serious injuries. You can see how the inhuman training of this North Korean Army unit has transformed them from normal soldiers into superhuman soldiers. Their training consists of muscle strengthening, but not only. They have to resist to all types of intense or moderate pain, sometimes even unbearable, during their exercises in order to become superhuman and without any reluctance, please. It's simply they are transformed into real war machines, both physically and mentally. They become cruelly cold until they no longer feel the emotions that a normal human being should feel, neither fear, nor pity, nor remorse. That was the physical side. Now come and see what is being done to the North Korean soldiers mentally. Along with all this, political indoctrination is rampant in the military. Soldiers are trained and educated to be dedicated, self-sacrificing, and loyal to the totalitarian and tyrannical regime and its leaders. Thus, self-criticism and denunciation sessions are held regularly, reinforcing control and discipline within the ranks. And of course, like any human being, North Korean soldiers can sometimes falter, make mistakes, or commit minor misbehavior. Well, Kim Jong-un doesn't want to hear about it. He has no mercy towards his servants. Discipline in the North Korean army is so paramount that it does not allow its soldiers to make mistakes. The latter are subjected to the slightest deviation for insubordination or failure during training exercises, to very rigid, severe, and trying punishments. We give you some small examples. Sensitive souls abstain. At the very least, soldiers may be subjected to humiliating and degrading treatment or forced labor. In more serious cases, they may be tortured or even executed for serious crimes. Currently, thousands of soldiers are reportedly incarcerated in North Korean detention centers and prison camps. Many of these people are subjected to torture and other inhumane and degrading punishment or treatment for violating certain army rules. These sectarian and even cruel punishments are intended to always instill fear and submission in the army. We told you it was merciless.